Hey there, boys and girls. It is week 3 of remote instruction at the Westfield Art Room. So this is going to be a lesson on 2 different types of art, realism and abstract. And we're going to talk about today how we move from realism to understanding abstract art. Sometimes abstract art might be referred to as modern art. Realism, like the word implies, starts with the word real, meaning things looked real. So, until about 150 years ago, the value of being an artist was that you could make things look like they really looked in real life. So, we had a style of art called realism. And for example, the Mona Lisa is an example of realism, one that we all kind of know. This is an example of realism from about the same time. This is a painting that is called Self-Portrait by an Italian artist named Sophonisha Agasola. And one of the things that makes this unusual is that it's a female artist. Back in the olden days, almost all trained artists were men, and so she is unusual for this, that she was a female artist that became this developed and advanced and respected as an artist. So you can see this is a selfie. That's kind of what we would call that today. And it looks like she would really look. It's like she was looking in a mirror and copying exactly what she saw with great detail. It is very detailed. It is very realistic looking. I would be willing to bet that if she were still alive today and you saw her, you would recognize her from her self-portrait. Now, a big deal happened about 150 years ago. They invented a new piece of technology called a camera. And they were rare, they were expensive, they were wow. Today, we almost all have cameras available to us all the time. They are part of our phone, and I would say most people use their camera as much, if not more, than they use the actual phone to talk on. Taking pictures, taking selfies, taking pictures of things and sending them to people. So the phone has become part of our everyday life, and on that has a camera. Well, about 150 years ago, they developed the cameras. And once cameras became available, making things look super realistic became less important as an artist. That was less valued, because if you just needed to see what something looked like, you could take a picture of it. You didn't have to spend a year or two painting a picture. And so artists kind of said, okay, we'll leave realistic photographs to our photographers, and we're going to start using more about our imagination and our feelings and how we see things kind of in our imagination and how we can interpret things. In other words, they started focusing less on what things really looked like and more on how they perceived them to be. And so it's not surprising that very quickly after the camera became available, we got a movement called Impressionism. And this is also by a female artist named Mary Cassatt. Still rather unusual to have a female artist that was as prominent as she was. And you can see this is still a clear picture of a woman and a child. It is called Nurse and Child. It would be like a not like a nurse, like the child is sick, but like a nanny or a babysitter. But you can start to see that there is not as much detail. It is not as much a realistic picture of exactly what things would look like. You can tell that it's painted, that it is an artist's interpretation. It still is clearly a woman and a child, but not nearly as refined and detailed as our self-portrait that we just saw. So we move a little bit further in time to to the 1920s, about 100 years ago. And here is a portrait by an Italian artist named Amedeo Modigliani. And you can see now we do clearly have a woman, a picture of a woman, but she is very exaggerated. Look how long her neck is. I would guess that she did have a nice, graceful, long neck, but certainly not as long as this picture would indicate. I don't think she could hold up her head maybe if it was really like this. And look at her long, graceful fingers and her very elongated nose. Notice how her eyes are green, but they don't really look like eyes. They are just representation of eyes. And so we're going a little bit more abstract here than we were even with our Cassatt nurse and child picture. Then we have an artist, I'm going to pull this off, named Pablo Picasso. And he is a very famous artist. And he started doing even more abstract pictures. In fact, his style particularly was called Cubism, where he broke things up into basic shapes and colors. And yet they still, if you see this, three musicians, if you look closely, you can see the three musicians here. A trumpet player, a piano player. You can see that this is still a portrait of three musicians. They are just very abstract. It is not intended to look realistic at all. And last but not least, here is an even more contemporary abstract piece of art by American artist Chuck Close. When you stand far away, this is clearly a picture of a person, a man. In fact, his name is Robert. That is the name of the painting. But if you go really close, start to look at how it is just squares with circles and lines and swirls. And then as you step further and further back, those shapes, those abstract shapes, start to form a face. Okay, so that is a little bit about abstract art. Our early abstract artists, and even ones that currently work, it is not that they cannot make things look realistic. It is that they choose as an artist not to continue their work in a style of realism. They have almost all learned how to create very realistic, even photographic realism in their artwork. But for whatever reasons, personal or environmental, they have made the choice to start doing abstract work. Now, there are still artists that do realistic work. That has not gone away. Realism is still very popular, especially hyperrealism, or things that look really, truly like you can't tell them from a photograph. So that still exists. And now we've added in this genre called abstract art. So this week, think about abstract art, what you think about abstract art. Check out the other video, that is your lesson video. And happy art making, boys and girls, and I will see you on our Google Live Hangouts.